Hi, I'm Jonathan Weinberg, and this is Drawing with Fountain Pens. Today is going to be all about nibs and also all about Fountain Pen Revolution, which is, if you follow my channel, is a company that I really like. It's run by Kevin, who is really nice. If you're having an issue with a pen that you get there and you email him, he gets back to you quickly, and they make sure that you're happy. It's a really interesting company based in Texas, but their pens mostly come from India. They've actually kind of expanded, and they sell a lot of other companies' pens too on their website, and they have fantastic sales, etc. What they're really terrific about, first of all, is their pen prices are very affordable, but also they've developed with manufacturers in India a ultra flex nib that I've reviewed in the past, and I think in terms of flex steel nibs and bang for your money, it is a really great choice, particularly if you get one of their pens that has an ebonite feed. The Himalaya pen, for example, I've reviewed and I use, and I think it's great. Recently, they introduced Jowo compatible nibs in housings that screw in and out of those pens that use standard Jowo housing. Now that includes a lot of pens that are made by small companies that I've bought at pen shows. For example, Jonathan Brooks's pens use a Jowo compatible screw-in nibs that go in and out. And they too make pens at Fountain Pen Revolution that do that. In particular, this pen, which I've always wanted to try, Tanoshii with the Ultra Flex nib, they actually make in Japan. Fountain Pen Revolution has a manufacturer in Japan, and it's a cut above their other pens. It lists on their website for $70. It's often on sale. It uses Jowo compatible nibs, and I decided there are two options. Actually, there are probably many more options, but two main options. You can get the Jowo compatible nib, Ultra Flex nib, with a plastic feed, and that's the one, if you pay $14 extra, that's the Ultra Flex nib that you would get on this pen. Or you can get a Jowo compatible nib in a housing that uses an ebonite feed. Fountain Pen Revolution has worked with the Flexible Nib Factory. They've now worked with Fountain Pen Revolution, and now their Ultra Flex nib is in a Jowo compatible housing. And that meant that I could put one of those into, for example, one of my favorite pens, this demonstrator version of a Opus 88 pen, which holds a tremendous amount of ink. And I could just unscrew and screw into this the new Ultra Flex nib from Fountain Pen Revolution that has the ebonite feed. Now the question for me, though, since the ebonite feed it's quite expensive, well, $55 list price versus the Ultra Flex nib with a plastic feed that you can put in and out of an Opus 88 or any, for example, you could also use the new Jowo compatible pen from Asvine. The J16 would work also. The question is it worth it to get the ebonite feed, or does it work all right with the plastic feed? And what I'm going to do is do a writing sample of both, and then I'm going to sort of scribble away with both, doing some sort of trees to see which is better. Is it worth it to pay all that extra money for the ebonite feed, and how well does this perform? I think that this is really one of the best solutions if you're really interested in a modern flex pen and you're drawing. So that's my ultimate conclusion, but I will go through the different writing samples and do some drawing, and we'll see how it performs. I do want to just mention the Tanoshii, which is made in Japan, and what a nice pen this is. I think it is, for Fountain Pen Revolution, it's a bit pricey, but if you get it on sale, it is really comparable to the Pelikan M600. Particularly, they did an orange version of the M600 that I have here, and you can see how similar in size and look this is. There's also the Dolce Vita pen, I think this is trying to emulate, particularly with the design here. I don't have one of those, unfortunately. It has, I always like this kind of a clip with a little roller here that protects your shirt if you clip pens to. It is just it's not a remarkable looking pen, but it is a nice weight. It's about 20 grams. It's very, very comfortable, very pleasant, and it's a great pen to use. The relatively new Jowo feed, so this unscrews. It is not, however, a piston filling pen. This is a pen, and a lot of people like that better. This is a pen that uses converters and cartridges in it, and I think that in some ways that can be an advantage. That's up to you how you feel about that. This is the Opus 88 pen that I decided to put the nib in. This is a pretty expensive pen. I think now it lists for like $140. I got it secondhand, actually. I have a few of these. I really love these pens. They hold a tremendous amount of ink. They are eyedropper pens, and yet at the same time they have a sort of two barrels of ink. The top barrel can be closed off basically with this plunger here, so that when you're flying on a plane or whatever, the ink here won't spill out. But you have to remember when you write with it to open up the channel between the two different sections, two parts of the pen where the ink is being held. You can see that this holds a tremendous amount of ink. So if you're particularly this nib, you're going to see the Ultraflex nib is very wet, so it uses a lot of ink. And if you're drawing, you're going on a whole day sketching trip, this is a really great pen to use that because it holds so much ink. You have to use an eyedropper to fill it, or I use hypodermic needles, especially for use for ink, not for shooting drugs into your arm, to fill this pen. It's really terrific. I guess today I'm doing a kind of thing with orange. The demonstrator thing is really great because then you can see where the ink is slushing around and how it goes into the pen, and you will see that when I write with it that it performs really, really well. So that's a good choice, but there are a lot of other there are so many pens that use Jowo housing. Another great choice now is you could get an Asfine J16, this titanium pen, and swap out its Jowo nib for the Ultraflex, either the plastic or the Ebonite version, and that would be a nice choice. This is a piston filler pen. It's not going to hold as much ink as the Opus 88, but it holds quite a lot of ink. This is the only pen, however, that will use cartridges. So, everything has a back and forth that if it might be best if you're drawing on the go, that you want a pen that you can easily switch cartridges for, so that you can bring a bunch of cartridges with. So this might be a good choice for you in that case. And there are a lot of pens that will use international cartridges with Jowo nibs, for example, that you can purchase. If you go the Opus 88 route, be careful. Not all Opus 88 pens use Jowo number 6 compatible nibs. That's the key thing, is the Ultraflex fits in a number 6 compatible Jowo nib housing. It's in the housing, but it screws in and out of the number 6 pen, so you got to make sure that that's the kind of pen that you purchase. This is the Tanoshii with the Ultra Flex nib. And it has an Ultra Flex nib, but a plastic feed Jowo housing. And this is Rhodia paper, as always. And this is one of my favorite inks, Tanoshii Sumi. This is made by Pilot, and it's just an excellent ink. And here you can see how well this pen flexes. I'm going pretty slowly, but it's not skipping. This is, again, the plastic feed. You can see very thin lines, thicker lines, really, really thick now. So this is performing very well. Now it's beginning to railroad, okay, a little bit. But if I use it with sort of normal weight, it's fine. So do reverse wiring. It's quite wet. And it's remarkably smooth and bouncy. I am so impressed with this. Okay. Now I wrote pretty quickly. If I print, you can see that I am getting quite a lot of variation in the line. Just normal writing. And that's not true of, so much of, let's say, the Pilot Falcon. You really have to press to get difference. But this, you don't have to press that hard. And it's really not skipping. Now here, this is the Opus 88 demonstrator pen. And you can see that it holds a huge amount of ink. Now this, I really like this pen, but it doesn't post. It's quite a big pen, and it has the nib. So Opus 88, and this is Nib Factory, and it is Ultra Flex, and it's Jowo, and again it's Tanoshii Sumi. It's Rhodia paper. Oh my goodness. There really is a big difference, actually. This probably because not only do they figure out how to put an Ebonite feed into the housing, but I think they've also tuned it. It just is very, very smooth. Amazingly smooth for a pen that can write this fine. It is extremely wet. And you can see that it's almost like I can't get it to railroad. I don't want to ruin the nib, but it is just, the flow is amazing. I really didn't appreciate this until using one right after the other. And you can see here how it really makes your handwriting look better. Oh, there it is. It just made it railroad. But that might have been my fault. And if you go reasonably slow, it works really well. I do not do calligraphy, but I would think that if you were a calligrapher, you would like this. So how do these pens draw? Now, I'm a big believer in sort of doing trees. I don't know, I find doing little leaves and trees a great way to sort of try out a pen. And so this is the Ultraflex Jowo compatible housing, but with a plastic feed. So this is the less expensive alternative. On this particular pen, it's a $14 upgrade. And it performs quite well, I think. Here I'm using it thick, scribbling really fast. Now keep in mind, in order to get it to go thick and thin, you have to sort of slow down, and you're more likely to get thick line when you're going on a downstroke than when you're going sideways. But you can see I can get really fine. Here's fine. Get some really fine cross-hatching. Or I could get really thick. Now, so far, I'm not getting any railroading. Good ink flow. Oh, I'm drawing off the page, though. That's not good. It is kind of scratchy, but it's, after all, it's capable of writing extra fine, and that is usually a bit scratchy. Nothing terrible. Okay, so this is the plastic feed. Here's the Opus 88, and immediately I notice, well, it's very, very wet, but also, because it's wet, it's very smooth. It really is terrific. See how black it is? Now, the trick here, if you're drawing, is you're going to have to be careful about not smearing, because this is so wet. Matter of fact, it's so wet. This is Strathmore paper that there is a bit of ghosting going on here. feathering, as they say. You can see a bit of feathering happening. This is Strathmore Sketch Pad, which is pretty good quality paper, but it's also going to depend on the kind of ink that you use. Takesumi, I really like it. It is a good ink for pens that are a bit dry. It's very, it almost has, it seems almost to me to be lubricated. It's also very black. Comes in a beautiful bottle. It's not insanely expensive. Anyway. Here it is, cross-hatching. Now, for whatever reason, the fine on this is a little less fine than the plastic version, and that's probably because it's pouring out so much ink. But it's keeping up. And as you can see, it's not running out. Key thing to keep in mind if you ever get one of these Opus 88 pens is that it is designed so that when you go on an airplane, it closes so that supposedly ink won't pour out when there's a difference in pressure. And so you have to make sure that when you're using the pen that you open it enough in the back so that the ink can flow through. It has two chambers, basically. And so you want to make sure that it's open enough so the ink can go back and forth. You have to be careful that, I've done this before, you don't want to pull this all the way out because ink can then come out of the back, and that can be a disaster. So you have to be a little careful with it. And you have to really sort of look, it's great that it is a demonstrator, because you have to really be aware of where the little plunger is to make sure that ink is getting to the nib. It's beautiful acrylic. They're beautifully made pens. They're a little pricey. I mean, this one lists for about $120. But like everything with me, I was able to get a used version. This was used, bought it used, lightly used on eBay for much less. But there aren't a lot of people selling used Opus 88 pens. And I think that's because people like them so well. Just then you got a little bit of railroading. But look at how thick this is. And then how thin. It also does reverse writing. So you can get very, very thin that way. That's a good way to do if you want to get some thin cross-hatching. And if you just don't use that much weight, you can get thin. So I would say my biggest criticism of the Ebonite is that it's quite wet. So you're not getting a super, super fine line, at least on this paper and with this ink. But flow is terrific. And this is just great for drawing. And I think it's worth the extra money for the Ebonite feed. Keep in mind that Fountain Pen Revolution often has great sales. So this is the Ebonite feed. So my conclusion is the Ultraflex in the plastic feed is a great buy. It works fine, but the Ebonite feed works even better. This is now one of my favorite pens to draw with. and I think it's terrific. If this is at all helpful, you enjoyed this, please do subscribe.